So thanks so much, Johannes, for taking some time to sit down. So I'd like to just start with a few questions just about yourself. If you can just state your name and the community where you currently live.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Johanis Tadeo. The community where I currently live is in Springfield, Oregon.
And can you also just say where you were born and in what year?
I was born in Othello, Washington in 1993.
1993. Great. And what is the current job that you're employed in? Where do you currently work?
I currently work at Community Alliance of Lane County, and I run a position called Springfield Alliance for Equity and Respect.
Yeah, right. And can you
And
talk?
I
Go
am
ahead.
a sorry, I was going to say I am a community organizer.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit, Johannes, about your pathway to get into this type of work? I suppose most people don't necessarily, when their kids say, I want to be a community organizer, although maybe some do. But I'm just curious if you could talk about your trajectory or the path that led you to your current position.
I think I've always been a kind of organizer throughout high school. I always had amazing folks in the community who I felt were kind of like everyday wore multiple hats. But basically, it came out of which really taught me how to kind of navigate who are the folks that I ask for money for, who are the folks that I have to go and pitch an idea, and hopefully that they'll be able to help and support. And then also, if they don't agree with me, how can I find ways to be able to sway them, to encourage them to see this as important? Because a lot of times at Lane, there were certain folks with positions of power and positions of privilege that didn't realize just 75 cents would go huge for one of the student unions. Um, and that's kind of basically how I started organizing. I started meeting a lot of amazing folks like Jim Garcia, Michael Samano, Anselmo, Rosemary, and they kind of got me um, they kind of what I wanted to get involved with. And what actually led me to this work was I was working with Latinx youth, and I was creating a student-led student organizing group where a lot of these kids ended up getting invited to create a mural at Community Alliance of Lane County. And with these kids, I was able to track them throughout their year middle school. I got to meet their families. I also got to find ways to be able to support them in ways. And I was contacted to have these students create a mural, and it ended up being a great transition because I think at that point I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And once I brought over the youth, um, Mary Malcolm from Calc ended up offering me the position that I currently have.
Hmm. How long have you actually, so how long have you had your position with Calc then?
I had this position for 6 years now. Long time. I'm now the oldest organizer at Calc. I think Michael was holding it down for a good 20 some years, but passed the torch.
You're catching up. And have you had any particular type? I guess I wanted to ask you how you learned to do your job. Have you had any particular type of training, whether formal or informal? Just what have been the things that have helped you learn how to do your job as a community organizer?
Most of it's lived experience, but majority of it, yeah. I did go to post-secondary education at Lane and U of O. Um, but basically what really helped me was connecting with the folks in the community, because some of the issues that I feel may be important might not be important to the folks out there in the community. So I had to make sure to create a space where they felt safe and felt like they could be able to let me know, like, hey, you know what, education, we don't really have control or support to support our children inside the schools, and we have XYZ racism, bullying, so on, and then same with the police. So I started kind of hearing a lot of these different ideas these different incidents that were happening, and started coming up with different ideas to try to solve it. And hold on. And basically, after trial and error, the first year, and working a lot with different organizations, really helped me understand this position, this job, and also know that every day things can change. And I'm gonna have to try different tactics that some may have told me not to try. but Springfield is it's like really interesting. It has a combination of so many different amazing folks. So I feel like depending on what community I'm working with, they're the ones basically to do the job. So and some of it from going to Lane social science classes.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit, just what does your work actually look like? If you were to talk about just the things that you do as a community organizer, some people have jobs. Well, I go in, I use a hammer, or I use a tool, or I make something. How would you describe the actual process of being a community organizer? What's the actual work itself look like?
Yeah, the work it varies depending on which institution. But like for instance, like I was talking about the school district. So I would be called in as an advocate to go in with the family or the child, depending on what the circumstances is. From there, I request a translator to be there because I am not a certified translator. I'm there to be able to listen and make sure that the information that's being transferred is being transferred in the correct way, and if there's something missing or something that wasn't translated for the person I'm there to advocate for, that I'm listening and making sure that I'm filling those gaps, as well as working with some of these institutions to be able to create a plan and what support, and also create kind of a support plan for either the student, the family, or even the institution itself. Because a lot of times I do also trainings and workshops inside some of the K-12 institutions here in Springfield. But basically, when I'm in the advocate role, I'm making sure that when I meet with folks before we have meetings, that they feel heard. A lot of the time, there's years and years of not feeling heard, that they have a lot to say. So that first hour is really listening to them and hearing them out. The second hour is trying to pinpoint what is relevant information to the situation that I'm there to help them with. And then also letting them know that if it's older information, giving them the information to understand why there's nothing that can be done for some of those older incidents, and understanding what can be done for some of these incidents that they're currently dealing with. And then I kind of do the same thing with the police. I go there just to be for reassurance, I help folks, especially with the Latinx community, who have felt afraid, who have felt like they're going to be retaliated against if they show up and put a complaint. I walk with them and walk with them through the steps of filing a complaint. If they want to speak to a supervisor, I also let them know some of their rights that they have before we go into a meeting. Sometimes, a lot of times, the police try to dictate the entire conversation, which sometimes makes the person nervous, makes them feel uncomfortable, that they don't actually release the information that they wanted to, that could actually validate their complaint. So part of my job is, like I said, is hearing from a lot of these folks, trying to find ways to make it easier. Go to the police, city, or the school district if they feel extremely uncomfortable. They can come to us in a safe location where they could be able to file a complaint. We work with them, and then we turn it in for them. But basically, that's somewhat of a everyday type of situation.
Mm-hmm. So you're dealing with a lot of different institutions in Springfield, I take it.
Yes. So I work with the city, the Springfield Police, and the Springfield School District, and Willamette Lane.
Right, on a pretty consistent basis.
Yeah. So we try to be able to stay on what's happening, what issues that the community has been bringing up. So, for instance, like police has been a big issue, especially because it has been difficult to get the police cameras. So there's been a lot of incidents where folks contact me, and sometimes we can't really do a whole lot because according to how our system is in Springfield, they want who's the person who wants to put the complaint in, where do they live, and why aren't they coming in to put it in the complaint? And things that happen is that a lot of that fear sometimes dictates where the person doesn't go in and want to file that complaint because it's just a completely scary situation. So sometimes we're about to put a complaint in, and then the family ends up feeling discouraged and ends up not filing it. So when I'm bringing some of these issues to the PD, they're not taking it as serious because some of these folks don't want to come forward, and they don't understand the fear that a lot of folks currently have in our community.
Do you feel that in each of these institutions you deal with, that you have a certain place of respect in the sense that the institution knows who you are and what you do, and you're able to have a good, at least a decent working relationship with them as far as trying to solve issues?
I think so, in some cases, yeah, and I think there is some friction, of course, things that my committee brings up. A lot of times they don't like to hear that they're not doing anything in a particular way for a community. So it's kind of like a love-hate relationship, but I think it's a positive relationship because we do meet every 3 months. We have check-ins with HR, city, Nancy Newton, city manager, and a couple other folks from the DI. It's a relationship that's moving forward because we've been getting a lot of things done. I think one thing for sure that has been an issue, I think, is the translation within the city, and I think that's something that we're going to be working on moving forward. We're actually able to 2022 with the Springfield School District due to a lot of the work that the community ended up doing and fighting for translation.
Yeah. So do you think, let me ask you this, are there any special skills that you think are useful to have or important to have as an organizer? You would say, boy, these are some things that you really need to be able to do effectively to be an effective or successful organizer, skills or qualities?
I would say active listening, and I think that's important, especially when you're doing a lot of this work of wanting to help out folks, because even a slight detail could shift the whole thing when you're bringing something up. And I would say be curious, be willing to try new things. Something that I've learned a lot working as an organizer, and then as well as going to different communities like in the LA County or San Diego or Chicago, because a lot of the communities when I went to go there, they put me to work, and I was able to see things that I wasn't able to see within my scope growing up in Springfield. So being able to check in with other folks really helped my work, especially in some of those bigger cities, because of a lot of the different incidents that have happened, but the way that the community comes together to really work on some of these issues, it's amazing. I saw in Chicago, like basically grandma and grandpas working to fundraise a scholarship for one of their folks that got to a very prestigious school. I've never seen that before in Springfield. Or I was able to see that in Salem, but never here in Springfield. So I would get ideas and then come back and then share them with folks and share them with the community. And I think it's just try new things, contact folks, be willing to get out of your first year working at Safer was going to every Latino business and letting them know, hey, this is who I am. These are the resources that I offer. If there's something that you want to see or do in the community, contact me. We'll play with it. And that's kind of how I've been doing a lot of the work here in Springfield. And luckily, some of these institutions like working with us and are partnered up with us. But yeah, I would say active listening and be willing to try new things and get out of your shell.
Yeah. So here's a two-part question, Johannis. The one side of it is, what do you find most challenging in being an organizer? And the other side of it is, what do you find most rewarding?
I think one of the most challenging things is sometimes when you're working with some of these institutions, like, you know that this is a marathon and not a sprint. Because a lot of times, like myself, like you can get really burned out in a lot of this work. And especially working with different institutions that have different policies in place and policies that were put in way before like my time. So it's kind of hard to go up against with some of these different things, but being patient and knowing that your work is adding, it is changing something little by little. But the most rewarding thing is actually being able to see the work succeeding, work moving forward, and seeing the community feel empowered. I think one of the little victories that I do have is when I have smaller events and I see families feeling empowered and feeling like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that, and now that I do, oh wow, like, or for instance, one thing that just came in my head right now that got stuck was the Springfield Museum. We were able to do an exhibit last year, and it was the first like Latino type of exhibit there. And I had a lot of families coming in there saying that, oh, I never knew that I was allowed to come in to exist inside this space.
Mhm.
You know, be allowed to come in, and that's powerful. And I feel like in a lot of circumstances, with all the families I end up working with and the community, I feel that that they can do a lot of them. Sorry, my puppy. That that they can move. They don't have to move through the shadows anymore. You know, that they can coexist and that this is their city as well. And I feel like that's one of the blessings that I get to see with a lot of folks. Same with the youth, you know, seeing them feel powerful enough for them to exist inside school or feel like that they can accomplish some things. Working a lot in Springfield, we see a lot of people stick to their pockets. And when they choose not to, is because something has happened that made them feel comfortable to coexist, like I mentioned before. Sorry, my puppy keeps throwing me off.
Okay.
But yeah, so basically it is, you know, having folks be self-empowered. That's what really is rewarding. Where they don't need me, where they don't need Safer. You know, it's amazing to be able to see that and seeing more brown folks walking down Main Street. It's beautiful. I wouldn't be able to walk a couple of years ago or feel comfortable or even want to think about that. And now, you know, you see these young kids walking up 32nd going to the soccer field. It's beautiful. So that's the rewarding that I'm able to be able to see.
Yeah, there's that classic line about organizing, that a successful organizer is one that organizes themselves out of a job at some level, just as far as that people then can take the ball and move it themselves because they're empowered, they've learned certain skills, the sense of their own power. And that reminds me something, I know I had a little bit of involvement in this with you a few years ago, but I was interested in talking to you, asking you about it, because it seems to me one of the major successes you were involved in was the use of the jail in Springfield for detaining, you know, for immigration detainers, and getting the city to change that policy with a unanimous vote. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about this, because that seemed like such a big deal and such an event with an outpouring of so many people, both the Latinx community as well as allies and supporters. And you were at the center of all of that. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that experience as a community organizer.
Yeah, that experience was awesome. That was one of the one of the highlights that I have, I think, for Safer is it was it was amazing to start off with. I think the students were the ones that found out that we had an ICE contract, and having them be able to show up at the first city council meeting, and then I think it was just the three of us, and then the next city council meeting being four people, and the next one being like seven, and then to the point that we ended up packing the entire room was amazing. Um it it, it was something that I think there was times where we wanted to quit because we weren't hearing back from the city councilors, and I felt like we were kind of like doing behind the scenes work with the city admin. We're doing it at the chamber with the city council. We're informing the community, and like I said, little by little, we started kind of being the lens for the Latinx community, because a lot of them knew that we had a nice contract, but there was a lot of false information that was going around. And I think the community being able to reassure them with that information, letting them know that, hey, that we have the power to actually change policies or even break up that contract, was amazing. And I think throughout the time when we started, we didn't know what it really meant. We knew it was a problem. We knew that there's families that they had partners that were disappearing and we didn't know why. And to what extent are they using this contract for? And we ended up finding out so much information. For instance, that we did a public records request, and the city of Springfield, luckily we chose specific words that ended up giving us so much more information than what we thought we were going to get. And we found out that there wasn't a health facility at the jail. We found out that they're not getting as many meals as we would have expected them to be able to get. There's no psych ward or any of that stuff. So the argument that they kept trying to push forward was that, well, we need to get violent offenders out of Springfield. So then our response was, well, the jail isn't prepped for violent offenders. It's a misdemeanor jail. So why would you bring those folks into our community? And just really trying to play with the wording as we're trying to push the narrative, because they kept coming back with, I don't want to say excuses, but just different excuses. Yeah, a bunch of different excuses. Most of the different city councilors didn't read the contract. So there was times where we ended up, we had youth present the contract to some of the city councilors, where at that point they felt like they couldn't reject it, so they had to read it. They pulled it out and were only able to find one paper. They were very, what would you call that? They were really astonished. They were really surprised that they haven't read this one piece of paper and they're making decisions on it, but they don't even know what it says. So that really exposed a lot of the stuff from the city council, and it really built up a relationship between me and the current mayor. And I think that's where we kind of have our love-hate relationship from there. But it really helped for part of the population, part of the community, to feel like I said before, like they could exist, like they can move, like they can contact someone. And I think that was the kind of like the beginning of this whole safer momentum, Escudo Latino momentum that we have here in Springfield, because folks can now feel like they can contact us and that we can make something happen. And even though that might not be the case all the time, and I think that with my community, they see that we're trying different avenues when we're trying to push something. But it's going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of support, because luckily with the ICE contract, I think it took us 12 city council meetings in order for it to pass. And a lot of time when we're trying to push something, whether it's the driver's licenses or any initiative that we're trying to push, sometimes folks lose hope. And I think just having those experiences that really took so long, and then to be able to have a victory, I think that gives a lot of folks the ability to be able to have that esperanza, that hope, that things can change.
Well, I remember the night of that council vote, it was just electric in that room, especially when it turned out to be a unanimous vote, because it went from a few city councilors, it seemed, that were supportive of ending the ICE contract to this momentum, or this snowball effect, where even the ones that were reluctant said they would go along because that's what the majority wanted. And it just, it was to me one of the more extraordinary evenings I've experienced as far as some of the things you were talking about coming to fruition.
Yeah, we went with the mentality that we were going to lose that day because we knew that there was only one city councilor that had our back, I think, and everybody else on that council kind of wanted to go with the popular vote, which was vote no. And that's where we really got surprised from the current mayor, Sean, because he was one of those folks that didn't matter what I brought up. He brought me something else. And yeah, and I think going into that meeting, he told me straight up that he was. I was trying to look at my list of the folks that we had to do the last testimony because we knew we were gonna have to be there the following week. And when Sean said what he said, I think he was like, we hear from the community that we don't want this, so let's just get rid of it. And that really pushed the other city councilors to change their mind because I think they saw nurses, they saw teachers, they saw folks that worked in totally different, that made people feel scared, and it was amazing. Afterwards, it was powerful to be able to walk around Springfield and feel that support because it was just like, wow, like, see, we can make things happen, and unfortunately that momentum kind of ended up dying off towards the end of that year. But I mean, that's a feeling that was so powerful. It was like you said, it was a moment in time that even my youth they still have with them, that shoot, we can really do something.
Yeah, I was going to say that the memory of those types of victories, that you don't get them all the time, but I think that memory really stays with people and can be very sustaining and empowering. And that's, I think, one of the best things that community organizers do. I'm wondering, Johanis, how political is your work, would you say? And I mean it in the sense that, because it seems like on the one hand, some of your work is around people getting appropriate services or responses from different institutions, but then you're also dealing with institutions that have power or political power, and you're trying to take some of that power away from them at some level, or to say that we want to have some sharing here, or we need to change some things. So it can sometimes, I assume, be adversarial as well as more cooperative. So I guess I'm just wondering how you sort out the political nature of what you do as an organizer.
What was interesting, even after that contract, it really put me in a realm that I wasn't used to. I felt like I've always had to go. I always saw the city council or some of these folks who position the power in such a negative way. And in some sense, I still do, depending on their actions. But I felt like after that kind of opened up a door of like, hey, Johanis, let's have a conversation. Why is this so important to you? I feel like that's a question that I get, make it or break it deal. And I felt like after that, like with, like, for instance, Steve Moe, Leonard Stair, I forgot what other city councilor, but normally when I work with them, they're listening more, trying to find ways to actually make something helpful, but also tell me the same dynamics that are causing this not to move forward, right? So that's what's been different versus me constantly trial and error and then feeling like, what are they thinking? Now I'm actually able to be in the room and know what they're saying and what they're thinking behind closed doors, at least somewhat. And I feel before it was just kind of, I also came from Lane and U of O, like different type of organizer of wanting to put them on blast and, look at what they're doing and, we need to, and now it's a little bit different of like, all right, how can we work together? You're going to be in the seat for the next 3 years. I understand that you don't like this community, but you're going to have to deal with this. where your constituents and whatnot. And I feel like sometimes we're at well, at least now in Springfield, we're at the level where at least we can have that conversation and it can be how do I say this? I'm trying to watch my words too. But like now it moves in a way that I feel like they want to help, whether they personally want to help in their heart or they see the benefit for the city and the new version of Springfield that everybody wants, right? And in order to be able to have that, well, you need everybody at the table.
Mhm.
And if you don't know enough about a certain community, then something like I told Leonard and I told Steve Mo, I'll take you.
Mhm.
I'll take you. I took Sean Van Gordon to almost all the Latino businesses and have him ask the questions. Like, for instance, he ended up asking Erica's Meat Market, um, do you know about this ICE contract? Do you know why it's important? And would you like to have this in our city? And every single one of the people said no. And he didn't understand. He was like, well, why do they hate this so much?
Mhm.
And I feel like there's so much more curiosity now than there was before from some of these elected officials that they're willing to be able to put themselves in those spaces. But now it's time for us to really put the pressure on them and inform them, hey, this is going on. Versus before, I felt like I wasn't even allowed in the room. I felt like I had to break down the door or I had to break down the window in order to be able to let my voice go in there. And now it doesn't feel like that. Now I feel like I have built enough of my name where I have my little foot in there, but I can at least squeeze more people inside of it. And as I'm starting to realize older in this order, leave this available for a lot of these younger folks and that are really more passionate and have more ideas than my generation. My generation, I felt like it was trial and error, or I have to follow the things from what my elders did, which was different from Springfield and Eugene. And and yeah, I forgot the
Yeah,
question.
I think that just brings something up for me, this idea of elders, because on the one hand, I'm assuming that it's useful to have elders and people that are mentors and folks that you can talk to and have done this type of work. On the other hand, I'm wondering if you ever experience any sense of, because you're a young person, any generational clashes or conflict as far as how to go about doing something, because the world that you're in is certainly very different from the world they organized in when they were your age or they were younger. I'm just curious about how those relationships work for you in your work.
I think it's important to have the elders be part of the work. A lot of them are the ones that really paved the way or had to go through certain circumstances in order for for myself to even have inside the door that I was talking about. I didn't really have that voice from my elders, and I wish I had more connection with a lot of my elders. But I think a lot of the work that I was doing in Springfield, I wanted to do something that was already done before, and I think that's what's important. Having those conversations with your elders is knowing what was done, what didn't work, and what could we be able to do to work together to to make something. I ended up hosting a listening session at a church, and I ended up getting contacted by a lot of my elders that I shouldn't be doing that. I'm kind of shining the light on my community, and I'm leaving them vulnerable. And in some way, yes, they were right. So what I ended up doing was I ended up contacting a local security company to be outside of that church.
Mm.
Um, but I wish that that way we could have been part of this because it was huge momentum. For my first listening session, we had 320 people show up at St. Allen, and from there we were able to hear from the folks what are the key issues. We had them split up into different little groups. I had my youth with a pen and pad. Sorry, my dog is thirsty. And they had a pen and pad, and they would write down what are the key things, what's affecting you right now. Is it tickets? Is it lack of info? Is it police? Is it school district? And I ended up having an immigration attorney go up and speak, and everything was great. But what I really wanted from that meeting at the end was I thought there was going to be so much more momentum with these other community leaders and community partners that they saw of like, okay, if this young kid could do this with these other kids, imagine what we could be able to do together. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And what happened was the start of my work of my community. They started more because we were able to at least listen a little bit. But I wish I would have been able to have more support from some of the elders. And I understand why they say the things that they said. And a lot of times they were facing it in the 60s and the 70s, and something simple like that maybe couldn't have happened because maybe there was so much hate that you're putting your community at risk at that time versus now where we have a lot more of our community and there's other mechanisms that are put in place that we can have to protect our folks. Of course, we're never going to be able to protect our folks 100%, but at least be able to collaborate together to make sure that they stay protected. And I think that was a struggle at the beginning couple of years. The first 2 years when I started, discouraged me a little, but it made me feel like I had to find other partners inside of Springfield, other partners, other young folks that were doing a lot of this work, and really trial and error with them, and kind of see what works, what doesn't, and what needs a little bit more work.
Mhm. Yeah, it sounds like in some ways I was struck by what you were saying earlier, Johannes, about when you first started, you had a sense of having to break down the door or the window to get inside or to get to the table. And now you're more at the table. It just strikes me that you have been able to put together both an inside game and an outside game, if you will, as far as how you operate. And it seems like you've become pretty adept at operating in both arenas.
Yeah. I feel like, especially being a person of color, you're gonna have to have multiple different ways to navigate, constant code switches to go through. Because honestly, there are times where I feel really successful, like we just moved 10 steps forward, and then next thing you find out that that person and maybe interpreted what you said and taking 20 steps back. So you're gonna have another thing helped out because of I backwards plan a lot. And I also something that part of that backwards plan, what they do is they see who is the secondary target that you have to influence. So if you don't get the person that you need to be able to make that vote or whatever, who are the other people that you could be able to help sway or help them understand, or might have a different perspective where they might be a little bit more open. And luckily, I've had at least these last couple of years, except to now, I always had my little nephew with me. At the time, he was like, I think 6, 7 years old, testifying at city council. And I feel like even just having him there and, a lot of the things that coming out of his mouth is coming from what he sees and how he interprets things, and he knows it's wrong. So I feel like a lot of having him there, having the youth there, having folks like my parents or folks like my grandma in certain spaces, it helps them be able to really see the community and helps them be able to get past some aspects. Of course, that doesn't always happen, but at least in the last couple of my organizing, that has been very successful. Because if they have a 6-year-old kid telling them to break the ICE contract, or a 6-year-old kid or 8-year-old kid at the time saying, "Hey, we need translation. You can understand me, but you can't understand my parents," you know. And then I feel like a lot of that really helped my organizing move forward. And I think experimenting like that and having the freedom to do that, because that was another thing when I first started. Don't use your nephew. Don't, you know. And I think in some ways I wouldn't have due to safety, but I felt like it also helped him be able to see. Right now, he's a little young organizer. He's testified at Bethel School District on his own and whatnot. So I feel like that second generation that's going to come after this is going to be very impactful in our community.
How old is your nephew now?
Now he's 12.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's a high
I
schooler.
remember him at the ICE contract meeting and just how he was so inspiring. So this brings a question up as you mentioned this, Johannes, because I know you had mentioned earlier burnout, and I know for lots of community organizers that happens just because the work is so demanding. And it's 6 years of this, you I think outlasted quite a few people. So I'm curious in terms of just broadly how you prevent or take care of yourself around burnout. And also it sounds like a connected question is it sounds like your family is very supportive of what you do, if I'm hearing you correctly. So I just was curious about the burnout piece, your self-care process, and also the level of family support you have for your work.
Yeah, so burnout does come. I've been burned out, I think, like 3 or 4 times within this work. And it is true what folks say, like every single time you get burned out, it does take a piece of you more away. But what I do now to be able to at least come back from that, I have to be able to make time to be able to balance that out. Like you talked about, being able to spend time with my family, spend time with my partner, go for a walk with my 2 puppies that keep making noise during this interview.
I'm all for supporting.
um, but yeah, doing a lot of those things are extremely important. Sorry, I lost you there. What was that?
No, it's been a little in and out. I'm sorry about this connection. I was just listening to you, and I was certainly hailing you having the dogs as a form of support.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Having mama and my dogs and my partner, my nephew as well, keeping in touch with him because sometimes I felt like it was difficult in a lot of this work of not, some folks not being able to talk about certain things or talk about the work. And I feel with my nephew, he understands, and we can kind of switch off from like business talk to just relaxing. And having my parents' support um, has been amazing. I feel like if I didn't have that at all, um, I would have got burned out a lot faster. When I have events, my dad's the one carrying the tables, the chairs. My mom is helping out with the itinerary of, the speakers, what speakers gonna be talking first, so on and so on. Um, and I feel like it also spares a fund for a lot of undocumented folks who pass away in the States and don't have enough money to be able to take their bodies to Mexico. And a lot of that thought came from some recent things that happened with my uncle that passed away. But it really made my dad kind of feel like I can do this, like I could start this. I could go talk to a couple of folks and see if they could be able to donate. My mom, she ended up feeling a lot more free to do her poetry, feel like she doesn't just have to work. She can exist and she can add beauty to the city, and my nephew, I feel like a lot of the communities that, hey, you can get involved. You can also join us. You are part of this beautiful thing that we have existing. You're not foreign to all this. Is us. And I feel like my parents do a really good job of that at all my events without even trying because they're just being themselves, and I think that's it's really beautiful. And I think if I didn't have them, I didn't have my partner, didn't have my all these things that I have right now, I would have quit a long time ago. And I think the reminders that I get when I do this work, or finding out that this young person that I'm helping is now learning how to advocate for themselves, or that the parents are knowing how to be able to support their child better, or the fact that we have, I know it's a small victory, and I tell my partner all the time, but we have brown kids walking on the street from here all the way to like 40 something. That to me, I know they might not think it's something to celebrate. And the first time I got called a spick, and just to be able to see that, we're existing, we're moving, we're breaking barriers. We're we have this the center Casa de Unidad that hopefully we're going to be doing more events coming forward. I feel like those are the things that give me excited, keep me at this work, and keep me more months, because I feel like there's something beautiful that I need to see happen before I leave.
Yeah, sometimes I think it's those small victories, like you said, Johannes, that really matter so much, even if just the idea of the youth being able to walk down the street. I mean, there's big political victories, but there's these smaller things too that I think just really matter a lot as far as people's self-image and self-worth, that you can't put a price on those.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think it's an amazing time where we're at right now because I mean, like I said, we had translation this year, passed for the Springfield School District. We have Willamette Lane add us to their strategic plan. Um, so now there could be a potential Latino park in the next year or two or something like that happening in Springfield. And I feel like, those are the kind of things that I'm happy to be a part of this work, and I'm happy to be able to see kind of like the change from the 90s when I first got here to now 2022. We still got a lot of problems, but the best thing about it is, like I said, these young folks that are coming out and these young organizers, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a time when I'm that older and being like, you can't do that. And then they're going to be,
Yeah, it'll happen. I hate to break it to you, but you got a ways to go before you get there. Um, hey, so before we wind up, and I really appreciate you taking the time, Johannes, I just wanted to ask you, you had any additional reflections or thoughts about your work that you wanted to share, or things that we might not have covered, or something that you just like to add?
I think one of the things that I love about at least my job that I have are the connections that I'm able to make with different organizations, and the things that the things that we were able to do together, like NAACP, Beyond Toxics, Catholic Community Services. I feel like with part of this job, you have to be able to network. You have to be able to have allies in this work, or else, like what we were talking about, that burnout or feeling stumped in your work. So I think right now that you asked me that question, that's the first thing that popped in my head is those coalitions, those relationships. Because if you don't have that, it makes the work a lot harder. That's one, and two, that's the community that really keeps you afloat when you feel burnt.
Yeah. My sense is that organizing is so much about relationships and relationship building, and it seems like you've really done an excellent job of that over the years. That I bet if you put yourself in the center and drew spokes out like at a wheel, you'd have a hell of a lot of spokes there. Because I think you're at the hub of a lot of things, but you've cultivated and developed and nurtured these relationships over time, which to me is one of the best skills that a good organizer has.
I lost you a little bit, but
Yeah, I was just, sorry about that. I'm sorry this connection has been so iffy. Maybe it's the time of day. I don't know. I was just saying that I think being able to cultivate and develop relationships is one of the greatest skills an organizer can have. And I think you clearly have that as far as the network of relationships you've built and understanding what it takes to develop and maintain those. So I take my hat off to you for that.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, so I think that wraps things up, Johannes. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm just gonna